You're listening to the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. It's fast, fun, free, daily deep dive Bible, and right now we're working on the book of Nehemiah. If you're new, welcome. You can jump in right here, or you can always go back and start at the beginning of any season. The whole podcast is available in an easy-to-use format at thetmbh.com.
I got a theory. Whenever you're watching a TV show or a movie and somebody's stuck on a cliff or a ledge or some little spot halfway down a precipitous drop and the heroes are coming to save them or whatever, I think that's supposed to be a metaphor. I think that is usually used as a way to explore the question of what happens when we push this character to the brink, to the very edge, because that's going to tell us the truth about who they really are in their heart. And maybe the character doesn't even really know who they really are in their heart until they get pushed to the very brink. And then we discover those things. And so in those very literal cliffhanger kind of moments, not like the end of a show where it gets cut off and then there's a part two. I mean, literally somebody hanging from a cliff kind of moments. The real point isn't whether or not the person's going to fall into the abyss. The point is, who are these characters when they're pushed to the very, very brink? And as a result, and now we're getting to my complaint, as a result, a lot of times once the rescue happens and everybody has learned all the lessons that they need to learn, they don't show you how they get off of the cliff. Does this bother you? And if it doesn't bother you, why does this not bother you? But it's such a common thing to just skip the part where somehow you scale this thing. I mean, there's only one rope, or is a helicopter going to get in there? How does this even work? But once the character tension is resolved, I guess that's all we really needed. And the people who make these TV shows and these movies, I mean, they assume that we understand everything just went to plan. You got what you needed to get out of the scene. Likewise, it seems like we get the exact same treatment on the seam here between Nehemiah chapter 5 and Nehemiah chapter 6, because the last of the great challenges has been overcome here at the end of Nehemiah chapter 5. And there have been a lot of challenges to this problem of the walls of Jerusalem being in ruins, the gates being all burned out, the people are in disarray, they have no leader. Nehemiah hears about it halfway across the known world in Susa, and he decides to make Jerusalem's problem his problem. So we got the first big hurdle, which is pitching the idea to Artaxerxes. He clears that hurdle. The next big hurdle is that Nehemiah's got to make this grueling trek with a lot of money and a lot of resources, and he clears that hurdle. The next big hurdle is he's got to overcome a bunch of people who in a procedural, bureaucratic way are opposed to him. He overcomes that hurdle. The next hurdle he has to overcome is how do you build a wall when you don't really have people who are good at building walls? But he rounds up a whole bunch of greenhorns and gets them motivated and unified, and all these people with normal jobs that are not wall builders, suddenly they're building walls. The next big hurdle is now the enemies are seeing that the walls are starting to go up, and they realize our plans to thwart this through bureaucratic procedural methods is not going to work. We're going to have to use swords. And so the enemies of this rebuilding project, they start rattling the saber, and Nehemiah finds a way to overcome that one. And then once the external enemies are defeated, he discovers there's an economic crisis. We talked about that for the last week and a half or whatever it was. And he overcomes that hurdle. That takes us to the end of chapter 5. And Nehemiah sort of spikes the football saying, "Remember me with favor, O my God, for all I have done for these people." And it feels like you could almost end the book right there. And that's where we left off last time around. But it's not. It's a seam. It's a division between the two. And so maybe you're feeling the beats of the story the same way I am here. It feels like we got pushed to the brink and we'd learned things about the character of the people, the character of Nehemiah, the character of the bad guys. And now getting up the cliff is just window dressing. We don't even really need to see that happen on camera. We know they're going to be fine. Or you could put it this way. Getting the rest of the walls built and finishing the building montage and seeing the last stones go in there and closing in the last of the gaps. We don't really need to see that. It's just, if we got unity, if all these threats have been addressed, it's a done deal. It's a foregone conclusion that the gaps in the wall are going to be finished. So then we turn the page to chapter 6. I don't think we're meant to understand that the wall is totally done at this point, but all the gaps are closed in. So now if the bad guys wanted to get in, they'd have to climb over, maybe a 6 or 8 foot section of wall, even if the whole thing isn't done yet. But clearly, getting all the gaps closed in is a foregone conclusion, as these sorts of things so often are in storytelling. You slay the dragon within, you can slay the dragon without. And slaying the dragon without is, it's cake once the things are dealt with within. So we don't even get to see the filling in of the gaps, and we pick it up right here in Nehemiah 6:1. When word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, these are the people who don't like Nehemiah, they don't like the rebuilding, they're not Jewish. We discovered that Sanballat is of Samaritan descent. He has an idea that he wants to build a rival temple a little bit further north. He's got a whole different agenda. He's mad about the Jews' success here. So when word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies that I had rebuilt the wall and not a gap was left in it, though up to that time I had not set the doors and the gates. Okay, so there we go. So we do still have work to do, but filling in the gaps is a foregone conclusion. It goes on, verse 2. Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message. This is so adorable. Hey, come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono. Well, what do you think, everybody? Let's do a quick poll. Should Nehemiah, A, go and visit his blood enemies at the ancient world equivalent of the abandoned docks late at night, unarmed and alone without a police escort, or should he, B, tell them to pound sand and continue building the wall? I don't know if my inflection gave it away. I feel like my inflection gave it away. I should be more careful about that. I don't want you to feel like you're nudged in one direction or the other when we do these polls, but the correct answer was B. It was B. He should not go out alone to some remote village in the desert to have a little chit-chat with people who have absolutely nothing to offer him and who would like to kill them. This is a terrible proposal. It's a horrible deal. And let's see whether or not Nehemiah can see through it. But they were scheming to harm me. All right, good job, Nehemiah. So I sent messengers to them with this reply. I'm carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? That was it. That was the whole message. Verse 4, 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same answer. Right over here, let me pull that out of there. I was using this as a bookmark in Josephus. Right over here, I got that little printed piece of cardboard that my buddy Destin gave me that says, be a thinker and doer. Nehemiah is thinking and doing. He is man in the arena-ing right now. He is accomplishing things that nobody thought could be accomplished. He's getting the kind of stuff done that normally people just chat about for decades. See the California light rail situation where apparently it's just impossible to build this rail project because of I don't even know why. There's a little bit of thinking, absolutely no doing. It's like the all-time metaphor for just nightmare projects. It's never going anywhere. Nothing is ever going to happen in this situation. And all the talking heads, no doubt, have sat and talked about where to put the rail and who to hire and what the safety standards should be. And nothing is happening. The same deal was happening here. We don't get all of the details about it in Nehemiah, but everyone was chitter-chattering about how the things ought to be. And then this dude shows up, and he's just a whirlwind of activity and do things. Now. And Nehemiah is getting stuff done at such an insane rate that his enemies can't even keep up. And now I got to think that they're mad for more reasons. I mean, we talked about the reasons they were mad in the first place. They're not Jewish. They don't like the rebuilding thing. A strong Jerusalem is not good for their objectives in the region. But also now they're probably mad just because he's making them look terrible. At some point, their own people, that being Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem's own followers, have to look at them and be like, hey, like obviously our rival people group over here who live in Jerusalem, I mean, they're inferior. And they do everything wrong. Their ideas are wrong and bad. And obviously we're much better than them. But that just makes it feel weird to us, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, or our great leaders, that they get things done and we don't do anything. We talk. You just say words. You say lots of words and you don't ever make progress on your projects. Nothing happens. And you tell us that there are reasons and like hurdles and paperwork and clerical things. It's very complicated. And you make it seem like all of this is super, super hard to do, but they're knocking this thing out in like a matter of weeks. And so I just wondered what you all are doing as leaders and why you can't accomplish anything. Nehemiah is making them look so bad for so many reasons, and his success is no doubt eroding their support. Come on, like we're men of action, lies do not become us, right? We know why they're inviting him out into the desert. And the reason that he's being invited out into the desert is so that they can murder him and solve the problem or frame him for something. I mean, nothing good is going to happen at this meeting out in the remote village on the docks at 1 a.m. with no police escort, come alone. And I adore the way Nehemiah looks at the situation, apart from just not going out in the desert and get murdered. But he looks at it and he has this mentality that's like, but you guys don't do things. You don't get to assign me work. I do things. So yeah, I got your email, but you're not in charge of my schedule. You don't dictate anything to me at all. I'm doing something and accomplishing something. And so, I read it, but I'm not going to do what it says because I'm doing a great work and you're doing nothing. And why should my work stop to go and do the work that you imagine you are able to assign me? Nah, I'm not going to do that. And then they keep sending the email again and again. Per our last email, were you going to come to the village? Hey, kindly checking back in. Just wanted to circle back on the earlier email and know that you're really busy. You might not have seen it. Maybe it slipped by, but just wanted to remind you about the meeting that we were going to do. I sent you a calendar invite with the location pin. It's at the abandoned docks in the remote village in the desert where people get murdered. Just if you could click yes and make that a priority, that would be great. If I don't hear from you, we'll get back to you after the weekend. Again, 4 times they hit him with this stupid nagging email, imagining that they can assign him work, but he already has a job. So he tells him to get lost. Nah, I'm carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? Golly, that is fantastic. Yeah, there's all these things in the Bible that have clear spiritual implications, and they're very important in terms of the grand narrative history of the Bible and the whole redemptive history of everything there. There's also stuff from time to time where you just got to stop as a human being. Like, look, I know that all of us in this metaphorical room together having this conversation, we don't think the same stuff. We're not all coming from the same background. That's fine. That's more than fine. That's awesome. That's great. We don't need to think the same things. We don't need to be identical. We don't need to believe the same things. But you know what? I think we can all agree on this. That is a dang good life lesson. This is a wonderful example of what shrewdness and focus and not letting people who just want to drain you and wreck the good things that are happening in your world and in your life that you just don't get to. You don't get to dictate that to me. What a marvelous practical example and hyper-applicable thing from the decision-making and leadership style of Nehemiah. Well done, man. I'm recording a couple of days ahead right now because I'm traveling to work on my other podcast with my buddy here over the next few days. So I think as you are hearing this podcast, the Matthew stickers should be going into envelopes. I think today and the next day are the days that we're packing all of that up and starting to send it out. So we're sending those to everybody who supports at any level on any platform. There's always a link down below, but thetmbh.com/support, I think can show you all the different ways you can do that if you want to, or you cannot. That's also totally awesome. But we're going to send those things out as a way of saying thank you. Obviously, this wouldn't exist without those of you who support the thing. And that is never lost on me. So I like to try to think of clever little things that I can do or send you to make sure you know that I appreciate it. And this time around, it is going to be the Matthew Achievement Unlocked stickers, which are rad. Okay, time well spent. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.